I did not want to believe the first warning because it sounded too ugly to fit the man I thought I knew. It came from another mother on a Thursday night, in the loud corner of a local sports bar where half the parents had gathered after our daughter's baseball practice. My name is Elise Fontaine, and I learned that my daughter's baseball coach had been betting against her team, and then using his position to steer games toward the losses he needed. She leaned close so nobody else would hear, and said she had seen our coach, Bennett Cole, at the sportsbook across town, placing what looked like a serious bet against our own team. At first, I almost laughed because it felt impossible. Bennett was the coach who barked himself hoarse from the dugout, stayed after practice to help girls fix their swings, sent encouraging messages after bad games, and talked constantly about character, grit, and earning wins the right way. The idea that he was secretly betting against the same girls he claimed to care about sounded like gossip born from a mistaken glance. But the moment I drove home with my daughter Harper, sitting beside me in her dusty uniform and cleats, I could not stop replaying the last few games in my mind. The strange pitching changes, the defensive shifts that made no sense, the batting order adjustments that seemed to take our strongest hitters out of the biggest moments. One comment at a bar could have been nothing, but when I started paying attention, it became the thread that pulled the whole season apart. I wish I could say I caught it because I was sharp enough to see the pattern early. The truth is, like most parents, I trusted the adult standing in front of my child with a clipboard and a whistle. I trusted him because he had earned a reputation over several seasons as demanding but effective, the kind of coach who might be tough on the girls, but seemed to care deeply about making them better. Parents complained now and then, because parents always do, but even the complaints were ordinary. He pulled pitchers too soon. He left pitchers in too long. He cared too much about winning. He did not care enough about winning. That was the normal noise of youth sports. None of us looked at a bad decision and thought, maybe he just profited from that. Harper was 13 that season, old enough to care deeply about every win and loss, but still young enough to believe a coach's disappointment meant she had failed him personally. She played second base and sometimes shortstop, and she had worked all winter to become steadier with her glove. Bennett praised her for that. He told her she was turning into one of the smartest players on the field. I remember how she glowed after he said it, sitting at our kitchen table eating pasta from a chipped bowl, repeating his words to me as if they were a medal. That is part of what made the betrayal feel so personal. Bennett was not just moving pieces on a board. He was moving children who trusted him. The mother who warned me was named Dana Marsh. Her daughter, Kenzie, was one of our catchers. Dana was not dramatic. If anything, she was the parent who usually cooled everyone else down. When she pulled me aside that night, her face was tight with the look of someone who regretted speaking before the sentence was even finished. She said, "Elise, I need to tell someone this, and I do not want to start a rumor." I asked what happened. She said her brother had been visiting from out of town and wanted to watch a basketball playoff game at the sportsbook inside a casino about 20 minutes away. Dana went with him for dinner. While they were there, she saw Bennett near one of the betting kiosks, not casually watching a game, but standing with a slip in his hand and checking odds on a screen. She said she almost walked over to say hello until she saw the team names on the ticket. One was ours. The opposing team was listed as the winner. She said, "I know what I saw, Elise. I cannot swear it was a final bet slip, but it looked like he was betting against the Cyclones. The Cyclones were our girls. Our daughters." I asked if she confronted him. She shook her head and said she froze. Then she worried she had misunderstood the screen. Then she worried that if she said something and was wrong, she would destroy a man's reputation. That last fear stayed with me because I felt it too. A youth coach can be removed by rumor before anyone ever proves a thing. I did not want to be the mother who turned a misunderstanding into a public accusation, but I also could not ignore it. That night, after Harper went to bed, I sat at my dining room table with my laptop open and pulled up the schedule. I wrote down the games Dana thought she might have seen him betting around, then added the recent losses that had felt strange. 3 games stood out immediately. In one, Bennett moved Harper from second base to right field in the 6th inning, even though she had not played outfield all season, then shifted a weaker infielder into her spot with runners on base. The next batter hit a routine ground ball that should have been a double play, but it went under the substitute's glove and 2 runs scored. In another, he pulled our best pitcher, Avery, after only 41 pitches while she was cruising, then brought in a girl who had missed 2 weeks with shoulder soreness. We lost the lead within 10 minutes. In the third, he had our hottest hitter bunt with 2 outs and a runner on third, a call so strange that even the opposing parents looked confused. At the time, I had explained each one away. Coaches see things parents do not. Maybe Avery's arm was bothering her. Maybe Harper needed outfield reps, maybe the bunt sign was missed, but all 3 games had ended as narrow losses after late decisions that seemed less like risk and more like sabotage. I barely slept. The next morning, I called my friend Priscilla Nakamura, an attorney I knew from a volunteer board at Harper's school. Priscilla did not practice sports law, exactly, but she handled fraud and compliance matters and had the calm voice of a person who did not waste panic. I told her everything carefully, starting with Dana's sighting and ending with the game decisions. She asked precise questions. Had anyone seen a betting slip? Did the league have a policy on gambling? Were these games connected to a sanctioned youth league or private tournament? Were their fees, prizes, or travel rankings affected by wins and losses? I had some answers and not others. Then she said, "Do not confront him yet." I asked why, even though I already knew. She said, "Because if he is innocent, you owe him more than suspicion. And if he is guilty, warning him gives him time to erase whatever he can erase." Priscilla suggested we find a private investigator who could legally verify whether Bennett had placed bets on games involving our team. That was when she gave me the name Marisol Vance. Marisol was a former fraud investigator with the State Gaming Commission. She had gone private 3 years earlier and still knew how the sportsbook world worked. When I first called her, I expected her to dismiss me because it sounded too small. A girls' youth baseball team in a suburban league did not seem like the kind of case that would interest a serious investigator. Instead, Marisol listened without interruption and said, "Small does not mean harmless. If he used his coaching position to affect wagers, that is serious." We met 2 days later in Priscilla's office. Marisol was compact, direct, and almost painfully observant. She asked for Bennett's full name, team schedule, tournament records, screenshots of any league communications, and video from as many games as we could gather. She also asked me to avoid putting anything in group texts. Parents panic in writing, she said. Then the wrong person forwards it to the wrong person, and suddenly everyone knows except the people who need evidence. That was hard. By then, Dana and I were both carrying the knowledge like a hot coal. We wanted to ask other parents whether they had noticed anything. We wanted reassurance that we were not imagining patterns in ordinary losses. But Marisol was right. If Bennett was doing this, he had probably counted on our trust and our chaos. We needed to be methodical. Over the next week, I collected footage. Youth sports parents record everything now, sometimes too much. So there were videos from phones, tablets, and one father who filmed every game from behind the backstop with a mounted camera. I told people I was helping Harper review plays, which was not entirely a lie. I downloaded clips after bedtime and sent them to Priscilla through a secure folder. Every time I saw Bennett in the dugout, clapping and shouting encouragement, my stomach twisted. He looked exactly like the coach we thought he was. During practices, he still laughed with the girls. He corrected their footwork. He kneeled beside younger siblings who wandered too close to the fence. He reminded them to hustle and respect umpires. I remember standing near the third baseline one evening, watching him give Harper a fist bump after she fielded a difficult hop cleanly. Harper looked over at me with a grin, proud that he had noticed. I smiled back because she deserved that moment. Inside, I felt sick. The investigation took almost 3 weeks. Marisol did not tell me every step, only what she could share. She confirmed that legal sportsbooks do not hand over customer betting history to just anyone, but there are lawful ways to document patterns, especially when multiple witnesses, public odds histories, time-stamped observations, and potential fraud are involved. She interviewed Dana and Dana's brother separately. She checked whether games in our league had been offered through smaller betting markets connected to regional youth tournaments. That was the first shock. I had assumed nobody could bet on our daughters' games because they were children. Marisol explained that mainstream books generally would not take those wagers, but offshore books and informal betting networks sometimes attach odds to local tournaments, especially when travel teams, rankings, or private cash pools are involved. Bennett had not simply walked into a normal sports book and clicked a button on a public youth game market like it was a professional match. He had been using a mix of online accounts and a local intermediary who handled questionable wagers on lower-level sports. The casino sighting mattered because that was where Dana saw him moving money and placing related bets through an account that led Marisol to the broader pattern. When Marisol finally called Priscilla and me into a meeting, she placed a folder on the table and said, "It is worse than a one-time bet." I felt my throat close before she opened it. Inside were timelines, screenshots, witness notes, and a chart that lined up Bennett's suspected wagers with our games. 7 bets over the season. 5 were directly against the Cyclones. 2 were tied to run margins or total runs in games where his decisions affected scoring late. The amounts were not enormous by professional gambling standards, but they were enormous for a youth coach with no legitimate reason to be involved. $500 here, $1,200 there. One bet just over $2,000 before a tournament semifinal. Marisol had flagged each game with key decisions. She did not use emotional language. That made it worse. She wrote phrases like unusual pitching substitution, defensive alignment inconsistent with prior games, delayed timeout despite visible pitcher fatigue, strongest hitter removed for non-injury reason, bunt call inconsistent with game state. Priscilla read silently, her jaw set. I stared at the dates and remembered where I had been standing for each one. I remembered Harper coming home after the semifinal with dirt on her knees and tears she did not want me to see. She had blamed herself because she missed a cutoff throw after being moved into left field, a position she had practiced maybe twice. Bennett had told her afterward, "Sometimes you have to be ready wherever the team needs you." I had comforted her with those same words. Now I was looking at a document suggesting the team had never needed her there at all. Bennett had, for his bet. Priscilla recommended that before anyone confronted him, we review the games more deeply with someone who understood baseball strategy from the inside. Marisol agreed. Suspicion was strong, but if we were going to tell the league, and possibly law enforcement, that a coach manipulated games, we needed more than parents saying his decisions were bad. We needed to show they were meaningfully different from his normal coaching patterns. Priscilla found a retired high school coach named Linda Carver, who had no connection to our league. Linda spent 4 evenings reviewing footage without being told which games had suspected bets. That part was important. She watched 10 games total, 7 tied to wagers and 3 control games where Marisol found no betting connection. When Linda finished, she called the bet-associated games strategically abnormal. In the control games, Bennett coached aggressively but logically. He used his best pitchers in high-leverage innings, kept his strongest defenders in the infield late, and adjusted batting order based on recent performance. In the suspicious losses, he repeatedly did the opposite at critical moments. Linda was careful not to claim she could read his mind. She said, "A coach can make one strange call, even 2, but this many, clustered in late innings, all hurting his own team's win probability, and then only in certain games? That is not random coaching noise." I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I was not imagining it. Dread because being right meant our daughters had been betrayed. During those weeks, the hardest part was acting normal. Harper would come home from school, grab a snack, and ask if I could pitch soft toss in the yard. She was trying to improve her timing. Sometimes she talked about Bennett with admiration, sometimes with frustration, always with the assumption that he was pushing them because he wanted them to succeed. One night she said, "Coach says we could make regionals if we stop giving games away." I nearly dropped the laundry basket I was carrying. Giving games away. The phrase rang in my head. Harper meant errors, missed signs, mental lapses. She did not know the adult saying it might be the one giving them away. I asked gently, "Do you feel like some of the losses have been weird?" She shrugged. "Sometimes." Like when he moved me to left. But maybe he knows something. That was the poison of it. Children assume adults know something. They fill in the gaps with trust. I did not tell her what was happening because Priscilla had advised us to protect the kids until there was a formal process. Still, my silence felt like another kind of betrayal. A small circle of parents eventually had to be brought in because their footage or testimony mattered. Dana, Kenzie's mother, was already involved. We added Marcus and Jen, whose daughter Avery was the pitcher pulled from that early game. We added Tonya, whose daughter Sophia had been benched during a suspicious 6th inning despite being our best hitter. Each parent reacted differently. Marcus got furious fast and wanted to confront Bennett in the parking lot. Jen cried quietly because Avery had spent weeks thinking Bennett lost faith in her arm. Tonya kept saying, "He told Sophia she needed to be mentally tougher. He said that to her face." Priscilla kept us focused. "We are going to do this in a way that protects the girls and preserves the evidence," she said. "Anger is understandable, but if you want accountability, you cannot turn this into a shouting match before the league sees the documents." The confrontation happened on a Monday evening after practice, though calling it a confrontation makes it sound messier than it was at first. Priscilla had arranged for the league president, a board member, and Bennett to meet in a conference room at the Community Recreation Center. Bennett thought the meeting was about parent concerns over playing time and game management. 5 of us parents attended, along with Priscilla and Marisol. I remember the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the smell of floor wax from the hallway. Bennett came in wearing his Cyclones cap, still dusty from practice. He smiled at us like he was ready for the usual complaints. "I know the last few weeks have been emotional," he said before anyone asked him anything. "But these girls are learning." Priscilla started calmly. She introduced herself, explained that concerns had been raised about possible gambling connected to team outcomes, and placed the timeline in front of the league president first, not Bennett. Bennett's face changed so quickly. I almost missed it. The smile did not disappear all at once. It froze, then tightened. He said, "That is ridiculous." Marisol asked whether he had placed any wagers involving games coached by him. He laughed once, too loudly. "On children's games, do you hear yourself?" Dana stared at the table. Marcus clenched his hands under his chair. Priscilla slid forward the documentation of the sportsbook sighting, the betting timeline, and the strategy analysis. Bennett leaned back and said parents were upset because the girls had lost. He accused us of looking for someone to blame. He said baseball is unpredictable. He said sometimes a coach has to make unpopular decisions. For about 15 minutes he sounded almost convincing because there was enough truth in the general idea. Baseball is unpredictable. Coaches do make unpopular decisions. Parents do blame coaches too easily. Then Marisol asked him about the tournament semifinal and named the exact amount of the wager placed against the Cyclones less than 2 hours before first pitch. Bennett went still. Priscilla did not raise her voice. She said, "Mr. Cole, this information is going to the league either way. It may also go to law enforcement. If there is context you want included, now is the time." He denied it again, but weaker. The league president, a man named Howard Ellison, looked shaken. He asked Bennett directly, "Did you bet against your own team?" Bennett looked at Howard, then at us, then down at the cap in his hands. For the first time that night, he looked less like a coach and more like a cornered man. He said, "I never meant for it to get that far." Dana made a sound like she had been punched. Bennett started talking then, not in a clean confession but in pieces. Gambling debts. Online accounts. A friend who introduced him to private betting pools. Small wagers at first, then losses, then pressure. He claimed he only bet against the team when he thought they were likely to lose anyway. Marisol asked why his coaching decisions changed in those games. He rubbed his face and said, "I could not afford surprises." That sentence emptied the room. I could not afford surprises. Our daughters were surprises to be managed. Their effort, their improvement, their chance at a comeback, all of it was risk to him. He admitted that his position gave him influence ordinary bettors did not have. He could adjust pitchers. He could move defenders. He could call for bunts. He could sit a hot hitter and call it discipline. He insisted he never told a girl to make an error or miss on purpose, as if that somehow preserved his character. Marcus stood up so fast his chair scraped backward. "You used them," he said. Bennett did not answer. I asked the question I had been holding for weeks. My voice shook more than I wanted it to. "Did you move Harper to left field in the semifinal because you thought she would struggle there?" Bennett closed his eyes. That was answer enough. But eventually he said, "I needed to change the defensive look." I said, "She cried in the car because she thought she cost the team the game." He whispered, "I am sorry. I did not accept it. Not then." Maybe not ever. The league removed Bennett immediately that night. Howard suspended him before the meeting ended and told him not to contact players or parents. Priscilla formally submitted Marisol's report to the league board and, because the wagers crossed into fraud and illegal sports betting activity, to local authorities. The next week was chaos, but it was organized chaos. The league sent a carefully worded notice saying Bennett Cole had been removed due to violations of league conduct policies and that an investigation was ongoing. Parents, who had not been in the room, demanded details. Some accused the board of hiding things. Others defended Bennett at first, saying he had coached their daughters for years and would never do something like that. I understood that instinct because I had lived there too. Belief protects you from the pain of recalculating every memory. But the facts kept coming. The authorities interviewed parents, reviewed records, and looked into the betting network. Bennett's admission in front of witnesses mattered. So did Marisol's documentation. Within a month, the league announced permanent policy changes. Coaches had to disclose any sports betting activity and were prohibited from wagering on any youth, amateur, or league-related event. Background checks were expanded to include financial misconduct records where legally available. Coaching decisions in tournament play had to be documented when they involved unusual late-game substitutions affecting pitcher eligibility, injury status, or disciplinary removals. Some parents thought that was excessive. I did not. Rules always look excessive to people who have never watched trust be exploited up close. Bennett faced a formal fraud investigation. I will not pretend the legal process was swift or theatrical. It was slow, full of interviews and documents and careful language, but he was no longer near our daughters. That mattered first. The league also reviewed whether any tournament results should be challenged. They could not replay games or give the girls the wins they might have earned. That was one of the most painful truths. Accountability can remove a dishonest adult, but it cannot hand a child back the exact moment stolen from her. Harper would never get to replay that semifinal with confidence in the adults around her. Avery would never know whether she could have finished her shutout. Sophia would never get that sixth inning at bat. All we could do was tell the truth and change what happened next. Telling Harper was the conversation I dreaded most. Priscilla and the league advised parents to be honest but age-appropriate. I sat with Harper on the back porch after dinner, when the heat had finally dropped and the yard smelled like cut grass. She knew something was wrong because Bennett had disappeared and the adults were acting careful. She asked, "Did Coach get fired?" I said yes. She asked why. I took a breath and said, "He made choices that hurt the team, and some of those choices were connected to betting money on games." Her face went blank in that way children look when an adult sentence does not fit the world they understand. "Betting on us?" she asked. I said, "Against you sometimes." She looked away toward the fence. For a long time she said nothing. Then she asked, "So when he moved me to left, was that because he wanted us to lose?" I wanted to soften it. Every motherly instinct in me wanted to blur the answer. But she deserved truth, not fog. I said, "It looks like that was part of it." Her eyes filled, but she did not cry immediately. She said, "He told me to be ready for the team." I said, "I know." She said, "I believed him." I moved closer, but I did not smother her. She was old enough to choose whether she wanted a hug. After a minute, she leaned into me, and then she cried with the kind of anger that has nowhere to go. That night changed something in her. Not in a dramatic movie way where she quit or became instantly tougher. It was quieter. For a few weeks, she was suspicious of praise. When the interim coach complimented her footwork, she nodded without smiling. When teammates talked about Bennett, some missed him and some hated him and some did both at once. That is the part adults forget. Children can feel two truths at the same time. Bennett had taught them real skills. He had also betrayed them. One did not erase the other. The league brought in a new coach named Coach Ramona Price, a former college player with a calm, steady way of running practice. Ramona did not try to replace Bennett with speeches. On her first day, she gathered the girls at the mound and said, "I know this has been confusing. My job is to help you play baseball and to be honest with you. That is what you can expect from me." Then she got them moving. Ground balls, relay drills, batting practice. No grand healing ceremony, just the ordinary rhythm of the sport given back to them. I respected that. The girls did not need to be turned into symbols of resilience for adults to admire. They needed reps. They needed fairness. They needed to rediscover that a coach's instruction could be about the game and not a hidden wager. Parents had to heal too, though most of us did not admit it out loud. We second-guessed ourselves constantly. How did we not see it? Why did we accept those decisions? Why did we let our daughters blame themselves? Priscilla reminded me more than once that trust is not stupidity. Systems depend on some level of trust, especially with children. The failure was Bennett's, and partly the league's for having no policy in place, but it was not Harper's failure, and it was not mine for failing to suspect corruption at a youth baseball game. I knew she was right, but guilt does not disappear just because logic tells it to. I went back through old videos sometimes, pausing on moments where Bennett clapped after a play or spoke to a girl at the fence. I hated that I could not tell which parts of him were real. Was he proud when Harper improved? Did he care about Avery's curveball? Did he enjoy watching Sophia hit? Or was every relationship just cover for the leverage he had? Marisol gave me the most useful answer when I asked a version of that question near the end of her work. She said, "People who exploit trust often do not fake every warm moment. That is what makes them hard to catch. He may have cared sometimes. He still chose to use them." That landed heavily because it removed the easy comfort of calling him a monster who had never belonged near children. The truth was more unsettling. He was capable of encouragement and exploitation in the same season, sometimes on the same day. That is why boundaries and policies matter. You cannot rely on your ability to spot bad intent from a smile at practice. The final league meeting was held 6 weeks after Bennett's removal. Parents packed the community room. Some wanted every detail public. Some wanted the board to stop talking so the girls could move on. Howard looked older than he had at the start of the season. He explained the policy changes, the reporting procedures, and the fact that law enforcement had taken over the betting investigation. Priscilla spoke briefly about safeguarding children in environments where adults have power over outcomes. Marisol did not speak publicly, but she stood near the back wall, arms folded, watching the room the way she watched everything. I spoke only because Harper asked me to. She did not want to talk herself, but she wanted someone to say that the girls had not lost because they were weak. So I stood up with my notes shaking in my hand and said, "Our daughters made errors this season because every player makes errors. They struck out because every hitter strikes out. They lost games because baseball is hard. But some of those losses were shaped by an adult who had a financial reason to make their job harder. I do not want any girl in this league carrying blame that belongs to him." The room went quiet. Across the aisle, Jen wiped her eyes. Dana nodded at me. I sat down before I could say too much. Afterward, several parents came up to apologize for doubting the concern at first. I told them I understood, because I did. None of us wanted it to be true. The Cyclones finished the season under Coach Ramona. They did not suddenly win everything. This is not that kind of story. They won some, lost some, and played cleaner baseball than they had in months. Harper returned to second base and made a diving stop in the last game that still lives in my mind as one of the purest sports moments I have ever seen. Not because it won a championship. It did not. It saved one run in a regular game under a hot sky with maybe 40 people watching. But when she popped up with the ball in her glove, she looked toward the dugout, and Coach Ramona gave her a simple nod. No performance, no hidden motive. Just a coach acknowledging a player who had done her job. Harper smiled then, really smiled, and I felt something in my chest loosen. Later, in the car, she said, "I think I like baseball again." I had to blink hard before answering. I said, "I am glad." Bennett's case continued beyond our season. We heard pieces through official updates, not gossip. The betting network was investigated. Bennett cooperated enough to reduce some consequences, according to what we were told, but he was barred permanently from coaching in our league and reported to affiliated youth sports organizations. His name became one of those names adults lowered their voices around. I did not celebrate his downfall. I did not feel sorry for him either. I mostly felt protective of the space he had damaged. Youth sports are supposed to teach effort, teamwork, failure, and recovery. They are not pure, of course. Parents bring ego. Coaches bring pressure. Kids bring heartbreak. But at minimum, the adults are supposed to be on the children's side. Bennett crossed that line in the most calculated way. He looked at a group of girls trying to become better players and saw a way to control uncertainty in his own gambling debts. That is the fact I return to whenever I start softening the memory. He could have asked for help. He could have stepped down. He could have stayed away from betting entirely. Instead, he let children carry the emotional weight of losses he helped create. Months later, Harper found one of her old game balls in the garage. It was from the semi-final, signed by teammates after the tournament, even though they had lost. She turned it over in her hands and said, "I used to hate this ball." I asked if she still did. She thought about it and said, "No, we were trying." That may be the closest thing to closure a 13-year-old can give herself. We were trying. They were. That was always true. The shame belonged elsewhere. I have told this story because I know how easy it is to dismiss one uneasy detail when the person involved seems trusted, experienced, and good with children. I almost dismissed Dana's warning. I almost let embarrassment stop me from calling Priscilla. I almost told myself that strange coaching decisions were just part of the game, but children depend on adults to notice when something is wrong, especially when the wrong thing is hiding behind authority. If you had been in my place, would you have confronted Bennett immediately, or would you have gathered proof first? Would you have known how to explain it to your child without breaking her trust in every coach after him? Share your thoughts, because I still think about those questions. Thank you for listening to what happened to my daughter, her teammates, and the parents who had to learn the hard way that trust still needs accountability. Subscribe for more real stories about family, betrayal, and the moments when ordinary people have to stand up for the people they love. I hope you and the children in your life are surrounded by adults who earn the trust they are given, and I hope